So I figure Italian.
Yes.
Yeah, I said Jersey. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, absolutely. That's one thing. When you say you're living in Texas, one thing I always think of when I moved to the South, Italian food. Like once you go past the Mississippi, west of the Mississippi, like
It is.
Italian food is just so hard to come. I mean, of course, I live out in Vegas now, and there's five-star Italian restaurants that are
Right.
fantastic. But those little delis, those little shops on every corner in the Mid-Atlantic, but to get a hoagie or something, you're like,
No
oh
good
my God.
pizza, no good bread,
You
no
just can't
pastry
get it.
shops.
Yeah. Or like, even like the import, there's like an Italian market out here. And
Uh-huh.
I was like, but maybe my wife, I was like, oh, we have to go. I got to get an Italian hoagie. And like, I love the cherry pepper hots. Cherry pepper hots
Uh-huh.
are the big one, but
Yeah,
it's a mid-Atlantic thing.
for sure.
They didn't have cherry pepper hots at the store. I was like, oh my God, this ruins the entire sandwich. Like, I guess it's just a mid-Atlantic thing. I just couldn't get it,
No,
which is
yeah.
something I like to commiserate with
No, I hear you.
yeah.
Heavy.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy bored.
I may say that the male is entirely hostile. No!
Resources.
Life, friends, is boring. We must not say so.
This is Andrew Wittstadt, and you are listening to Heavy Word. And we're recording this on December 13th, 2025. My guest today is Joe Battaglia. Joe is a sports journalist and author, covering a variety of sports at a variety of levels. And he's penned his debut novel, titled Beneath the Rings, out just this past October, a thriller novel that centers around the 2040 Summer Olympics. Star athletes go missing in a terrorist plot, demanding ransom money, and Joe uses his experience covering the often chaotic and very crowded venues to the book's advantage. Joe has covered everything from volleyball for the Newark Star Ledger to the Olympic Games for NBC, where he was part of the Emmy award-winning team behind the NBCOlympics.com coverage of the 2008 Beijing and the 2012 London Olympic Games. He's a member of the National Sports Media Association and the International Sports Press Association, a seasoned content executive in the world of sports journalism. And he's here today to talk all things books, writing, novels, sports, journalism, and more. Joe Battaglia, thanks for coming on Heavy Board.
Thank you, Andrew. Happy to be here. Looking forward to getting to talk to you.
Of course. And the obligatory first question to all artists and writers that come on here is we like to ask, what was your childhood like? Where did you grow up? What did your parents do? How did these early years start to form Joe?
Yeah, I grew up in Newark, New Jersey. I come from a an immigrant family. My father was born in Italy, moved to Argentina when he was 5, and then immigrated to Syracuse, New York, in his early teens. My mother, her family actually came from the same village as my dad, in Italy, but she was born and raised in Newark as well. My dad was an entrepreneur. He owned several beauty shops and barber shops, and my mother was a teacher. She taught English as a second language, and so between the two of them, I had ingrained in me at a young age, things like work ethic, but also the importance of academics, and they really pushed me in that direction.
Yeah, were you Italian speaking in the home or?
No, I can speak culinary Italian. My grandparents were very much like you would expect off the boat. grandparents to be. We made everything,
Right.
made our own wine, we made our own sausage, we made our own tomato sauce. We, grew our own vegetables, we grew our own fruits. That was very much part of my upbringing, and it's stayed with me to this day. I mean, those are things that I still do, as hobbies on my own. I just I don't want to lose touch of that, and I'm trying to pass some of that stuff down to my daughter as well, and kind of teach her some of those things. So like, as I'm doing these things, like I'm looping her in and having her help me the same way. When I was a kid, I was turning the hand crank on the pasta machine, or helping my grandfather, dump boxes of grapes into the distemmer to make wine, like, whatever it is, right? I was a part of that. And yeah, I don't want to lose that, part of my heritage.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said your mother was a school teacher.
Yes.
What level?
She taught grammar school. She worked for Elliott Street School in Newark, which was a really old. I think the school started in the 1800s, and um, the population of the area of North Newark where we grew up changed significantly. It was very much in a largely Italian enclave for the longest time, and Italians started to move up, into the suburbs, up Bloomfield Avenue, which is a main thoroughfare that runs like through Newark and then through Bloomfield and then up into Caldwell and some of the suburbs. They actually call it, the Guinea Gulch, from a, kind of derogatory standpoint. Like, but, as the neighborhood changed, more Hispanics, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, kind of moved into the area. And, as such, there was a need for ESL in the school, and my mom, did that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one thing I always just make a point of is it's incredible. We've had a lot of writers on the show at all different levels. How often one of the parents or both parents are a school teacher, and and emphasize the reading, the writing, the kind of putting in the work, learning, that this is a fun activity, learning and trying something new and creating stuff and editing and stuff. It's just incredible how that, it pays dividends down the road. It's interesting how that plays out. Yeah. When was this? When was this? We don't have to do put your age out there for everybody, but was this the 80s, the 70s, 80s?
Well, I'm 50 years old, so it was, late 70s, early 80s.
Fantastic.
And then I lived in Newark for the first 39 years of my life. Like I never moved until I came to Texas for a job in 2014.
Yeah. Yeah. That's I mean, why would you move when you're living in Newark? Yeah, it's fantastic.
I had everything that I wanted there. Like I never wanted for anything. Like we lived
Right.
across the street from Branchbrook Park, which is this massive, I think it might be one of the first county parks in America. We had places to run around and play and ride bikes and do all sorts of things. And then, we had, all the, the culinary things that you want, all your pizzas and breads and pastry shops and all of that neat stuff. And my grandparents only lived like 5, 6 blocks away, so family was always close. I don't know that I would have changed my upbringing for anything.
Right, right. Especially that kind of the so you lived right through that boom there in the 80s. We asked this only, and I like to know the years of it. We have writers from all over the place, obviously, but like, the generational things. It's just a constant thing that's always talked about now. And I'm a millennial, so I think that puts you firmly in the Gen X camp.
Hmm.
And then yeah, I have baby boomer parents, so I have all that kind of stuff. And then my daughter is 1 year old, so she's in the up and coming here.
Yep.
But yeah, it may come up, it may not. But I like to ask.
Yeah.
Um, Going off all that, so we like to ask the artists and writers, when did reading and writing come into your life?
Really early. Reading, my mom always, tells a story. I had this garbage truck book when I was a kid, and um I may have been 2 or 3 years old and like had the thing memorized just
Right.
from my parents reading it to me over and over and over again. And it was almost like a parlor trick, right? You can, bring people over and like sit me down with this book and like it looks like I'm reading it, like I have it
Right.
like I'm turning pages. And so reading was very, very early. And um, creative writing kind of, developed, I think, from that reading. We were um, reading was emphasized big time. We always had, I don't know about you, but we always had like summer reading lists.
Yeah. Oh
We
yeah.
had the books that we had to read before, we came back to school in September. But then we would vacation in Florida every summer, and my grandfather had an apartment building like a block and a half from the beach, and we would go to the beach in the morning, come back, have lunch, and then it was reading time after lunch. And there was no afternoon beach if we didn't get our reading done. And um, above and beyond the school list, we would always go to the library and check more books out and read. So um, always a voracious reader. And I think from that, the creative writing sort of came, fairly recently. My mom was cleaning out the attic and she found this short story that I wrote when I was like 10 years old, like, banged it out on a Commodore 64. And, I mean, it was a preposterous story. It was about it had like my grandfather and my great uncle as characters, and like they were in the mob, and they and nobody in my family was in the mob. I'll just be clear, but and they were had this they crafted the plot to infiltrate the Vatican, right? And I don't know how many, I don't remember how many pages it was typewritten, but like that kind of gift, I think, that imagination, I think came from reading. I really firmly believe that.
It really is kind of a next step, like a logical. If you really enjoy reading and getting that, what you get out of a fictional work, getting consumed by it, even at a young age, the next step is always, well, I want to try that. Can I do this? Like, that's how do you do this? I want to ask you about sports about this too. Before we get to sports, any authors that you would point to as your idols or your go-tos or who you would really admire, and this could be anything. This could be,
Stephen King is my go-to.
okay, yes,
I
yes.
mean, I've loved reading Stephen King my entire life. I was more recently, I've been doing a lot of fishing on the weekends, and I will get up at like 4 in the morning and hit my little fishing hole in town and put a Stephen King audiobook on, and a lot of times, I'm sitting in the dark, right? Like with my back to the parking lot, holding a fishing pole, like listening to Stephen King and like half-heartedly hoping like somebody doesn't come up behind me and like knife me in the back, but Stephen King has always been a go-to for me. I was listening to uh, one of his audiobooks. Desperation yesterday while I was out fishing. Another book that, two books actually that have kind of resonated with me over time. One was the one that I read as a kid, which is The Westing Game. And that was kind of a mystery, and very well written. I forget what award it won. It wasn't a Peabody, but it won some major writing award. And I've actually reread that as an adult. I mean, that book is just, kind of always resonated with me from the first time I read it as a kid. And the other one is Dracula. Like,
Okay, yeah.
I read that book more times than I can count. I could probably recite it to you at this point.
Stephen
Uh,
King has said that's one of his main influences too. Yeah.
yeah. But I would say, like, in terms of influences,
Yeah.
those are big ones for me.
Yeah. I mean, this is a podcast where we love Stephen King. We love the literary on this podcast too, but I always think King is such a figure. in the world of letters. He's such a figure. And he doesn't quite get the credit he deserves. Of course, he's incredibly popular, one of the richest writers to ever live, blah, blah, blah. He's written, 60 some novels or whatever it is. But his influence over the culture, I always say he's been a sledgehammer to the culture. He completely changed how horror movies are made in the 70s. He completely changed, a lot of the imagery, the expectations. It was just, he's such an American icon that I just love it whenever King comes up here and have an opportunity to talk about it. Um, were you a kid when you first was like Carrie and stuff when you were a kid in the 70s or any of that stuff
Yeah.
was your first
Yeah, those were some
kind
of
of
my firsts.
yeah.
The Cujos, Carries. I mean, I actually, I think I watched the movies
Hmm.
Needful Things and Apt Pupil before I read the books. And that wasn't intentional. It just sort of happened.
Right.
But after watching those movies, I went back and read the books, and they were, I mean, the movies were pretty spot on to, the books. So that was incredible screenplay work. Another
Yeah.
one that I just read recently, and it took me like places where like I never thought a Stephen King book was the book Fairy Tale. And it's kind of starts with like a kid in a town, creepy old man, like they start interacting. All right, like you can, if you've read enough Stephen King, you can kind of sense the rabbit hole that this book is going to go down, and it does a complete 180 and like literally turns into a like mythical kind of fairy tale. And I was like blown away. I was like, this is not where I expected this to go. Um, I think he has a tremendous gift for taking you for a ride.
Yeah. That's the big thing. Yeah. And that's one thing he doesn't get enough credit for is how, because some of the language isn't the most high literary stuff, he gets crapped on. And of course, only in certain circles here. He's one of the biggest writers to ever live. But his creativity, his output is unmatched. They just don't give him the credit for how creative, how original a lot of those stories are and the cultural impact of those stories is just beyond I think any literary text we've had written in the last 50 years, like his impact on a culture in America and other art making movies, novel writing, all of this stuff that he's influenced that maybe when he's gone and stuff it'll maybe 50 years from now he'll start getting that kind of credit, but we'll see. We'll see. Curious for myself, was Matt Christopher in any of this, or is that a little too? I remember reading a lot of Matt Christopher sports stuff when I was a kid. Was that like the 80s? I wouldn't say like they
It
always
may
seemed
have
old
been.
to me when I was reading them in like the 90s, but I don't know how old they were. I was like, was that in the 70s or when was Matt Christopher
I think I was
cranking out
80.
those sports books? And they were always great, kind of Stephen King-esque where you get into them and you're like, there's a young boy usually, trying to do some sport and all of that, and you kind of get taken for a ride. But that brings me to the next question here, which is, how did you get into sports? When did sports start for you? When did your love of sports come? And the same kind of deal, what were the first sports you started getting obsessed with and stuff?
Oh, I mean, I was a mediocre athlete growing up. I played Little League baseball. I was terrible, and I was on the worst team in our league. Didn't really enjoy that much. In high school, I played a little bit of football, but wasn't very good. I was a mediocre shot putter on our track team. Not good at all. But I played some basketball. I didn't play for our high school team. I did play a little bit in middle school. So I was always in and around sports. Again, in the summers too, like we did basketball camp, we did tennis camp, we did swimming camp. I mean, me and my sister were really, exposed to a bunch of different sports. She was actually the athlete in our family. Like um, she played her high school team had an unbelievable private school named Mount St. Dominic, and they had a very strong Catholic middle school league, like in the county. And I remember she said her first day of high school, she goes in and like literally all the best players on the middle school basketball teams, like in the league, showed up first day in high school. Like, so they were loaded, that her class was loaded with athletes, and
Right.
they actually went on to win a state championship in girls volleyball, upsetting an undefeated and number one ranked team in the state. They won the girls basketball tournament of champions as the number one team in the state, and she won a softball state championship. And I think they finished number one in the state. So um, she had an unbelievable athletic experience. Mine, not so much. But in high school, I think is where some of like that creative writing again started to develop and materialize. And coming out of high school, I was fortunate to win a couple writing scholarships. Jerry Eisenberg, who's the great columnist from the Newark Star Ledger, ran a program called Project Pride in Newark that provided all sorts of opportunities for kids growing up in the city. They sponsored athletic teams and scholarships, and there were some writing scholarships. And the two that I won actually opened a door for me to the Newark Star Ledger. I was at the awards banquet to receive those scholarships, and sitting at the table with Sid and Gary Dorfman, who ran the Door Feature Service, which was a syndicate that provided all the high school and college sports and obituaries and things to the Star Ledger. And they said, "Hey, why don't you come check out the office one day?" And so I was like, "Sure." So it was my freshman year in college. It was my mom's birthday, October 13th, 1993, and I went in to check out the office, and they offered me a part-time job as a stringer, answering phones and taking game scores and results. So I started working part-time, and within the first year, one of the full-time writers left to go to law school, and there was suddenly an opening for the state volleyball beat, and they gave me that at the tender age of 19. So I started working full time as a 19-year-old, and I spent 13 years at the Star Ledger, and it was an unbelievable learning experience for me. I really got to cut my teeth in sports writing, both in different kinds of writing, but also sheer volume, right? We had 8 different editions that we put out every night, and so sometimes if you covered an event, say I covered a track meet, right? I wasn't coming back with one story; I was coming back with 8
Right.
potentially, depending on the teams that were at the meet. If like all our editions were covered, like I got to spin this thing 8 different ways before the end of the night. And so, yeah, I kind of learned a lot on the fly. And I actually learned more going to work than I did going to school.
Right.
You know, you just can't replace that hands-on experience, in a classroom in a textbook.
Yeah.
So. That's kind of where the sports writing started.
That's fantastic. I mean, I'm so curious about this just because as someone who was a generation after you and then trying to do the writing thing, the Newark Star Ledger, that's a local paper in Newark, I imagine, right? Are they
It's the
still
it's the
around?
largest paper in the state of New Jersey.
Oh, wow. And they're still around?
They're done with print edition.
Right.
Like that went away like a year or two ago.
It's going all that way. Everything's going that way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and but they still they're owned by Advanced Media, and so like NJ.com is basically what the Star Ledger has become in the digital age.
Yeah, yeah, I'm fast, and we're fascinated by that on this podcast. The kind of the changing of the media landscape in terms of that jobs for writers, and yeah, you could get a job being a beat writer for you covering volleyball or something in the state, or the school board, whatever it is. And where I grew up, a lot of the Baltimore local papers, I think we had three at one point, went down to one. And now I think the Sun is still around, but then somebody who, bless them, they're trying to, with the help of David Simon and some other prominent, Baltimore former journalists that have gone on to be much more famous for other things. David Simon, creator of The Wire and all of that. And he would, I forget what I think it's called the Baltimore Banner. And they just started to do something, and hopefully they're making an impact. But yeah, the local papers, the sports papers, like you said, I mean, and not only is it just for people trying to start a career, it's a shame that there's less opportunity, but you think of the coverage for these local athletes, these kids in high school, like they're not getting their name in the paper like you used to be able to even 10 years ago, just for having, the championship game, or you're just getting buried under, clicks for a more, an article that makes people click on it more than the local reporting for, the
Yeah,
state
I mean,
championship.
in our heyday, like on a Sunday paper, high school sports section could be 6, 8 pages. I mean,
Right.
I mean, it
Printed,
was
right? Print
like
pages. Yeah.
printed. I mean, it was
Yeah.
remarkable.
Yeah.
On the days that on the Saturdays where the section track and field championships would happen, we would have the results of every section meet like in agate form. Like it was like full pages of agate. I mean, it was pretty remarkable thing to be a part of.
Yeah.
And I left like right when, that started to like the writing was on the wall that
Right.
um, the newspaper industry is struggling to figure out how we're going to monetize digital, right? And all sorts of things started to change. And I was like, I don't like where this is going, right? Like I need to start looking for another opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I always, it's hard to talk about because I call it an elegy for these certain things, these certain types of print media specifically, uh, because we did lose something. We are losing something in that. So I just love hearing that when you're starting out, getting your start, somebody just gave you a chance and you had to kind of be like, holy crap, I got to put out 8 pieces, a day, or a week or whatever it is, and it really kind of baptism by fire.
Yeah.
And
I
then
mean,
you
I actually have the very first article I ever wrote. It's right here.
this is fantastic. And listeners, he's holding up it's a yellow newspaper. It is beautiful. It is a
Yeah.
beautiful piece of media.
And the funny thing is like, and it's not funny. It's just amazing. It's like also the relationships that came out of it. So like
Right.
this
Yeah.
article that I wrote was from the Essex County Cross Country Championships, and um, Hazel Clark ran for Columbia High School, and she won this event. And if you don't know the Clark family in New Jersey, you might know Joe Clark and the movie Lean on Me. Well, Joe Clark was Hazel's dad, and they were a tremendous family of athletes. Her older sister Joetta was an Olympian. Her sister-in-law, Gerald Miles, was an Olympian. Her brother JJ coached her at Florida. He's now the director of track and field at Stanford. Hazel ran on a bunch of Olympic teams. But, I got to, meet Hazel and her family, like, at that meet. And like, we maintained a relationship to this day. She, I got to cover her, at the Olympics,
Yeah.
and, um, she went to Bermuda and was the director of tourism, sports tourism there, and like we brought track meets and cross country meets for high school kids to Bermuda. We brought U.S. athletes over there to compete against Bermudan athletes, and I got to help work on that project. And so, um, I mean, she's almost like family, right?
Right.
Like, um, I don't know that like that's happening today,
Right.
because like you said, that newspaper industry is and is kind of gone, and like the kids aren't getting that same degree and level of coverage that they did, back then.
Yeah, and from writers, conversations I've had, friends I've had, stuff I hear through the back channels and things. I'm in the kind of more academic side of it, but I'm in the writing world and that side. And what I hear, it's everything that has to do with any type of writing. For unfortunately, is we are losing that, and especially the kind of the grooming mechanisms for young aspiring people, where they used to be able to have plenty of opportunity for you to come in there and try have your have a hand at it, go at it, but yeah, that's falling apart. So then we're having less writers come through, and maybe even less rigorous stuff. You don't have an editor over your shoulder as much saying, we can't do this, you got to find a source for this, you have to I don't know, just less quality work, and then less work overall. But then there's more stuff than ever. I don't know if it's just AI, or if they call it in marketing static, right? Stuff that just takes up space on the internet.
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know. That was never a thing when you were writing for the print papers. Oh, a static piece. It was just a piece that you were working on. Yeah, that changes things. And I want to talk to you about social media involved in this too. But the track and field and the Olympics stuff. How did that come to be? You said you did a little bit of track in high school.
I did
Uh,
cover some track in high school at the Star Ledger. Jim Lambert, who's a legendary track and field writer in New Jersey. I mean, he was a one-man band, and oftentimes, like, I would help him cover meets. Especially if there wasn't a big volleyball weekend or something like that, or if it was a weekend where track needed to take precedent, right? Like, I was always there. And so I did my fair share of covering high school track. Volleyball was my main beat, and I also had high school swimming. And when as I mentioned, when I kind of sensed that the business was changing, I was fortunate. Here's where my dad comes into play. Um, Being a barber, right? He talks to a gazillion people, and one of his customers was in the business development side of things at NBC, and um, he told him what was happening, and he got me an interview with Joe Jeshu and Dave Gobble at NBC Olympics, and I guess a still interview. They hired me in June of 2007 as a just to be an editor, a desk editor for NBCOlympics.com. I was not really going to be involved in any of the Olympic coverage.
before the streaming wars, before Peacock and all of that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was literally going to be like, editing copy, right?
Right, right.
Manning the website and the homepage and things like that. I was not supposed to be in the content creation side. Um, And then the Olympic Trials Marathon was held in November of 2007. They ran it the day before the New York City Marathon. And I was on the desk for sports.com. It was obviously an early morning, as most marathons are. And I was the only one in. And a little ways through the race, one of the athletes, Ryan Shea, had a cardiac incident, and unfortunately, he passed away
Oh, wow.
for that race. And so now I'm the one that's like got to handle all the editorial on this, and the breaking news and the updates that are coming from our TV folks that were in the city. I was in the office in Stamford, Connecticut, and our Olympic researchers were on the ground, so like they're getting stuff and they're funneling all this my way, and I'm like having to assemble this and get it up and out there and man it until the cavalry could come in and support. And it was, needless to say, a very long day. And that night, Dave Gobble called me into his office and he said, "We don't have a track and field producer yet for Beijing. Do you want the job?" And I said, I don't know that I even thought about it. I said yes because
Right.
I knew that was my ticket to China. I knew they were only bringing the producers for track, gymnastics, swimming, and volleyball. And so I was like, yep. And so like that started my Olympic and international track and field covering career. It and if Ryan Shea did not pass away that day, I don't know that my career trajectory would have been what it was.
Yeah. Isn't that unremarkable? The kind of the little things that happen that set the path forward. I
Yeah.
mean, Tom Brady recently gave an interview. He said when the quarterback coach had a cardiac event when he was, second year in the league or something. And he said, obviously that's a terrible problem, and we were all sad. And he said, but it actually helped spark him where he said he had Belichick come in and start giving him coverages. They said he basically was taught coverages by a defensive coach because the quarterback coach, had this tragedy happen and was out of commission for that. And he said it was so important to his development, this kind of happenstance thing. And there's always something like, obviously it's a tragedy and you don't want a tragedy to happen for it. Nobody wants that. But like, yeah, these little things that happen. I mean, that's the good stuff. That's the good stuff. Those little things that help you just launch a trajectory towards this Olympic coverage
Mhm.
of track and field. Do you have any, just a quick aside, do you have any favorite track events that are your favorite to cover or watch or?
Um, I mean, everyone loves the 100.
Right, yeah, it's the most
Like
exciting. Yeah, yeah.
that's the marquee event. I'm actually a big fan of the 800 meters. I think it's like one of the hardest events in track. I love the 400 hurdles,
Yeah.
and that's another super challenging event. I enjoy the strategy of some of the distance races as well. It's kind of interesting to watch the sit and kick, or someone's going to take the pace out like early. And try to put the thing away. I think cross country is fun for
Yeah.
that game. Same thing. I do love the marathon. Again, there's a lot of cat and mouse and strategy involved there as well. And I like that aspect of it. But I would say those are, and then the pole vault is probably my favorite field event.
Yeah, for some reason I was always drawn to the triple jump. I don't know why. It's just the way you have to do it that makes it a little more complicated and
Yeah.
harder. And then when I was in, I played football in high school, and the coaches were always on you, like, you got to do something in the off season. So they'd make you do track. And I remember the track coach, he would come into the locker room and all the big guys, I played offensive line, I'm a bigger guy. And he would always be like, all right, all the big guys, he pointed us, starting five line, but he's like, you're all playing, you're all throwing for me. As I threw a little shot put and discus. And even that stuff, like just trying to do that stuff is so incredibly difficult. The discus, especially, doing that throwing, the shot put, even. I always say the two hardest sports I ever tried, just as a kid playing around, wrestling, uh, and water polo. I just remember being so exhausted at the end of those. And I played football most of my life and stuff, but I just remember being so exhausted at the end of those sporting events.
They're
Like just trying,
nonstop.
exactly, just spent after the
Yeah.
second period in wrestling. I couldn't pick myself up off the mat. I
Right.
was just like, I can't do this sport. And water polo, the same thing. I like couldn't after like one one session. I was just like, all right, I don't think this sport's for me. This is ridiculously hard. Incredible stuff with that,
Yeah.
these athletes. uh okay, this is where I did want to ask you about something where we touched on this a little bit, how social media kind of changed sports coverage and stuff. I'm a fan of the sports writer Ethan Strauss.
Mhm.
He wrote that book Victory Machine about the Golden State Warriors and stuff. I like his coverage and a lot of stuff, but even he has talked about, he left, he worked at the Athletic for years. He left and went independent on Substack, doing his own kind of thing, writing his books and doing his journalism that way, maybe with a little bit more political bent than you would if he were still working at the Athletic. But I don't know. I feel like that's part of the what the cultural change is. There's more politics involved now, especially in the article writing and stuff. The clicks, the coverage, everything is streaming exclusive. You have to pay for access for some of this Olympic coverage now. That's all. I don't know. How have you seen it change as somebody who lived through the change and is, excelling in the field still? How have you seen the kind of social media? And I know it's changed everything, and so please answer this however you want. I know it's a huge question. We don't have to come up with definitive answers here, but yeah, how have you seen social media kind of change sports coverage, sports journalism? The kind of the tiffs, the beefs between reporters and athletes now sometimes, Kevin Durant and some. If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Board. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Board is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard. These guys will not hesitate to call out a sports journalist by name if they didn't like what they said. That didn't used to be the case. I don't know. I mean, how
Well,
have
yeah,
you
I mean
seen
that
this?
didn't
Yeah,
that never was the case because you usually had to wait overnight to get your article in the paper the next morning, right? Like now there's an immediacy and to it. I would say that immediacy is really the big change, right? Like nobody wants to wait till tomorrow morning to like get their sports results, right? Like they
right,
want now. And you look at not just the scores, but I mean, you can the streaming, you can watch, your games on your phone if ESPN isn't carrying that game, right? Like they've got a Gamecast, right? Like you can
right.
watch basically what amounts to an animated box score, right? Like, updating in real time, right? So like, that's changed. And I think from a delivery standpoint, where social media is really gone and is a benefit, right? Is um, if you're a content executive, like I've been, you need to, look at where your audience is, right? And if your audience is on social media, right, like you need to be delivering that content to social media, right? And so I think, in a lot of ways, you sort of pivot your approach and you tackle your social media first and, your website or whatever second, right? You're looking for, um, you know, engagement numbers, right? You're looking for
Right.
things like video views and minutes streamed and likes and shares and engagement, right? Like have now become the key metrics, right? It's not newspaper sales, it's not page views necessarily. I think that's kind of sort of where things have pivoted. I mean, and even from a a live streaming standpoint, right? Like you want to if you're not, putting stuff, on Instagram Live or on YouTube or on TikTok, right? Like, then are you reaching your audience,
Right.
right? Like if that's where your audience is, like that's where you need, your content to be. So I think that's where we've seen the, maybe the aside from the immediacy aspect of it and, needing to, there's always this race to like get things out first. And unfortunately, I think that's led to some really shoddy reporting. Instead of being correct, everyone wants to be first.
Right.
Um, but I think, aside from that immediacy aspect, I think it's like just the actual, delivery of content and where you're putting it. And
An immediate feedback. Anybody can comment right away. Comment right. Well, oh, you're an idiot. Something. It could be that, or it could just be, a nice comment too. But it could be, yeah, just immediate feedback
right.
on
Well, I
whatever
mean,
you're putting
look,
out.
just
Yeah.
look this week what happened with the football coach Sherrone Moore at Michigan, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Where did that break? It broke on social media. Like
Right.
like that story broke on X, right? Like, it's again, like, when people are living on their smartphones now, right? Like, you break news, not on TV, not in the newspaper, not online. You break it on social media.
Yeah.
I mean, Adam Schefter would be out of a job, right? Like, if he wasn't breaking news on social media.
That guy too. I mean, I don't know what that guy did. If he's taking a lot of Adderall or what, but that guy is always on it. I don't, he must not sleep the way he's constantly
I
on it and
mean,
tweeting
Adam
it out.
Schefter,
And
Shams Charania, like, all of
yeah,
those, insider guys, right?
yeah,
Like, they've got three, four phones going at the same time,
right.
right? Like, I
Yes.
mean,
And sometimes in a commercial, you'll see him if you're watching ESPN, he'll have like four of them laid out on the table.
or
Yeah,
even if he's like live doing a spot, he's got his phones open. Up, wait,
right,
like, you know, you watch him sometimes on, he's, always a guest on Pat McAfee show, right?
right,
He's like interrupted like Pat McAfee's like interview questions, like because he's getting like his phone buzzed
right,
with some breaking, news out of the NFL or whatever.
right. Some trade alert. Yeah, anything, injury update. It's I just can't imagine the stress that that guy's under. I mean, doing that constantly for TV and
Right,
then broadcasting it, being on TV, the energy that takes to do like a live broadcast. I mean, my God, that guy must not sleep.
right,
But yeah, that's incredible how that. I mean, it's just so fascinating how this has changed. And yeah, I mean, I just this reason it's a constant theme on the podcast because all media has changed now because of this. And then I don't know. I mean, and I think it even culturally, I guess culturally, we've always liked little like, leaks or a little glimpse into the locker room or maybe, but I don't know. It seems like it's almost worse now. Like people are almost hungry for like some type of beef or an athlete's unhappy at their team or, just anything like that can be exaggerated now
Oh yeah, I
because
mean,
of
like
this. Yeah.
so and so athlete, like, has deleted all mention of their current team on their social
Right.
medias, right? Like, well, what are we reading into this, right? Like, is he demanding a trade or, like, yeah, I mean, you're constantly monitoring social media for, clues that could be leading to a breaking news story, right?
Yeah. Yeah, what do you take on the Moore situation over there in Michigan? Just quickly, now that I have you, sports journalist on here, I know everybody has a take on it. Everybody's got some. What's Joe's thoughts on?
I mean, well, one, I think it's incredibly unfortunate that, I think from a psychological standpoint, right? Like he's in a very bad place, and
Right,
when you're threatening the life of yourself and someone else, like that's nothing really to joke about. I think the thing that interests me is like there are a ton of rumors out there that like Michigan has known about this for a long time and really had kept silent through the Ohio State game and the signing day. Make sure that they got all that stuff before they actually moved on it. I think it's kind of interesting. If I was listening to Rich Eisen, who's obviously he's a Wolverine, Michigan grad and supporter, and um, he said, like within minutes after Michigan lost the Ohio State game, he had four separate people texting him like information about Sherrone Moore and the affair and everything else. So I think the biggest thing that's like yet to come is like how long did Michigan know about this and sit on it, right? And then like are more heads going to roll? I mean, I think the AD is probably the next one,
right.
that could be on the way out, especially if he knew about this for a long time and didn't do anything about it.
Yeah, and I'm
Basically,
not
just to
as
protect the big game and the recruiting.
yeah, absolutely, and I'm not as familiar with it either. Like, for me, it was just another story on social media as it was breaking, and of course, I follow college football, but kind of more passively than I follow professional football during the season. I did definitely spend time watching on Saturdays and all that, but Yeah, for me, it was always, I was like, wait, what did this guy do? And I was like, oh, wait, okay, so he had this kind of chronic cheating problem. I was like, I guess the real thing they're getting him on is that the kind of freak out once he got caught, right? And then kind of going around threatening to kill
Well,
himself
yeah,
or
I mean,
kill the
like,
girl, breaking into her
yeah.
house. Like,
And even yesterday, I mean, they
right.
let him out, on $25,000 bail, and then like someone was reporting on X that like he was immediately like DMing like some OnlyFans girl that like he was involved with, right? Like, come on.
Oh boy, oh boy. To do that in the social media age too and think that it's, still 1990 or something and you're not going to
Yeah.
get found out that we don't have a history of when your cell phone's in your pocket and where you are.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I mean, I think, it's tragic on a lot of fronts, right? Like he's, again, obviously in a bad place, mentally. He's stalking the woman that he had an affair with. He's blowing up the DMs of the OnlyFans, girls that, he was. I mean, they were saying that he was like texting OnlyFans girls in the middle of the Ohio State game. Like, I mean, that's insane, right?
That's Harbaugh would never. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know if any of that is true, but like those are things
Right.
seen on social. And um I mean, he's got a wife and three daughters, right?
Right.
Like, God almighty, like, I mean, they're the biggest victims here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah. I mean, I guess we'll see how this plays out. I just while I had you on here, I was like, oh yeah, I guess we could talk about that. I didn't plan on it, but I was like, oh well, maybe we should talk about one of the biggest things in sports right now.
Yeah, it just happened. Might as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is this. I mean, there is a changing sentiment around a lot of that too. I mean, I'm thinking, who was the LSU coach, right? Was it Urban at Ohio State? The kind of the coaches of it,
Ed
picture
Ogeron. Yep, yep.
pictures of them and stuff of like sleeping with, students, whatever. Uh, yeah, that's become something that's not supposed to happen. And obviously there's personal consequences for that in terms of like, they're destroying their families doing
Right.
this. But then there's like the professional consequences and stuff. And I mean, if there's a larger cultural thing about, I think personally, and we don't have to get into this, just like male sexuality in general is just looked down upon in a certain way, and you can't be too, as the internet would say, you can't be too horny or something, or it looks bad. And of course that there's reasons for that, but yeah, it's just there are all
Well,
these. No, please.
I mean, all these guys like sign contracts that have morality clauses,
Right,
right? Like,
exactly,
I
yeah.
mean, like, so, I mean, you know what the consequences are.
And you're getting paid a lot of money to
You're
sign that,
getting a
like,
pick.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Sherrone Moore was making 5 mil a year. I mean,
Right.
not the highest paid coach in college, but I mean, still 5 mil a year, right?
Yeah,
You
I'd
and I
take
aren't
it.
making 5 mil a year. So I mean, like, you think about like you're jeopardizing that, you're jeopardizing your family, and like, I mean, I don't know, like, you know, because I've obviously never been in that situation. Like, I mean, that's got to be. I mean, how great is the temptation to
Right.
to ruin all of that? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, that's Ethan Strauss again, the sports writer I like. Where he wrote a great piece, and this was more about the basketball players because that's mostly what he covers. Where he was saying, especially during the 2016 through 2020 kind of period here, where he was saying a lot of people were criticizing these athletes. Where he was talking about Durant, where he just said, "Look, when you're in these locker rooms, he's like, and people said, oh, they should be behaving. He's like, these are the most competitive, testosterone filled guys you've ever been around. Like they are the most competitive psychopaths about winning, but being the best. And maybe that attitude starts coming into play with decision making like this. So even somebody like Moore, who's, once you're past the point of being a player and you have to coach or to be involved in the game you love still, coach, develop players, administration, whatever it is, be involved in the game, journalism, right? You could do all this stuff. Randy Johnson's taking pictures. Why? Because he loves sports. He doesn't have to, he wants to be involved in it. Uh, I don't know. There's just something about this that atmosphere, the competitive nature that attracts people that are maybe willing to do this. I don't know. I mean, it's just something like this really competitive, masculine field, and everybody involved in it is obsessed with that or is driven by that in some way. I don't know. And that it just tracks people that are willing to, yeah, maybe risk everything with that, who knows,
Yeah,
self-selection process in some way.
yeah.
And before we get to the book, I wanted to ask you another kind of a broad, large question, but since you cover the Olympic sports, I wanted to ask you about that startup company that's doing what they call the enhanced games, and I'm doing that in air quotes, listeners. With where I think they're called that actually, where something like that, where steroids and blood doping is not only allowed but encouraged. I just wanted, what are your thoughts on something like that?
It's preposterous. I mean, you know, there's a voracious appetite for sports,
Right,
right? And um, I feel like when it comes to doping, there's some holier than thou, kind of attitudes around it, and I think that's maybe what sort of sparked, well, screw the IOC, screw the USOC, like forget WADA and USADA, like let's just do our own thing and like let everybody do whatever they want, right?
right.
You know, uh, I mean, one of the best American sprinters, in the world, Fred Curley, like here, graduate of Texas A&M, right? Is the first guy that signed on to enhanced games. It's like, I mean, people around here are like shaking their heads, like, what are you doing, dude? Like, but the other thing is like, the sport doesn't pay a lot, and
Right.
so if you've got a guy that's throwing a pretty substantial amount of money out there around this. I mean, sad to say, people are going to chase a paycheck,
Right.
and like maybe willing to do whatever, to their bodies to like get that paycheck. And am I a proponent of it? No. Will I watch it? Yeah, probably because, there's a curiosity factor there. It's like, I mean, it's like watching a train wreck, right? Like,
And they
uh,
have weird incentives where they have like $1 million incentives if you break world records and things like that.
right.
They're incentivizing people to even do more of the
Yeah, I mean, when you look at what World Athletics pays for Olympic gold medals and world records, not even I mean, like not even close to that. So the dollars make it an incredible temptation to do that. And Fred has kind of gone through a period where he's lost some sponsorships. It takes a lot of money to, support yourself as as an athlete at that level, between your agent and your coach and then your trainers and your physio and your medical and your travel and I like all these things, right? Like, you run a meet and you get, a high, five to low six-figure appearance fee and performance bonuses like that. I mean, that money's out the window, like,
right.
you know, real fast. So,
That's after taxes and the agent manager takes a cut
oh
and
God,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, everybody's taking a cut. And so, I think, a guy like Fred Curley is probably, doing it for the money. I
Right.
don't know that for a fact, but um, yeah, I'm not a fan of the enhanced games, but there's a curiosity part of me that like is probably going to watch it.
Yeah, I'm always curious to see how much it actually could be. But there's always rumors, and then we talk about the Russian scandal and things like that, the doping scandal. I mean, I wonder how many of them are doing it, and it's always difficult. There's this, he goes on Rogan a lot, this guy Derek, he has this YouTube channel, and he does these breakdowns of athletes. And then usually when an athlete gets caught with a banned substance in a test, he'll do a breakdown of what the results are and just be like, what caused this? Is he taking things? And he always does this very interesting breakdown for the professional sports leagues, at least NBA, NFL, where they have a set of rules and banned substances. Where he says, there's maybe 30, 40, banned substances in the anabolic category for most of these leagues. And he said, but they don't even count. There's about 40 or 50 synthetic anabolics that aren't even on there and they're not even testing for. I don't know. And you do think about some of the size of these guys. I mean, I'm looking at football's the sport I follow the closest. And he always makes the point that it's not even about size, it's more about recovery at that level,
Yeah.
faster recovery than anything else, and strength, of course, and all of that. But then there's the negative side effects because it doesn't actually strengthen your tendons and things like that. And that's, in the 90s and early 2000s when I was growing up with baseball, all of these big hitters would have wrist injuries constantly because, they're doing so much steroids that the ligaments are tearing,
Yeah.
and yeah, I don't know. And I think of Bill Burr always has, he had a comedy bit where he had just a stand-up bit where he said, I miss steroids in baseball. He's the guy jacking 70 homers a season. He's like, it was fun, I don't know. Maybe there's that aspect to it. Maybe I don't know. It's just crazy that we're at this point now where we're just like, I don't know how many people are doing, we're seeing Olympic records. I mean, you cover this, especially something like swimming. Obviously, I'm from Baltimore. Swimming's a big deal there. Phelps, Ledecky are from that area and stuff. I don't know. There's been rumors about blood doping. There's been rumors about, people are breaking records every year. Are we just getting better and better at this? Or are we doing something, are they doing something? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Lance Armstrong always point to these things. I don't know. I mean,
I mean, I think there's a lot of things. I mean, uh, the technology is better, the training is better, like the recovery tools are better. I mean, that's not to say that like, there isn't widespread doping happening because
right,
there is. Uh, in track now you've got super shoes, right? Like, carbon plates and running shoes and super spikes and like, all of that, gear technology, right? Like, I mean, it happened in swimming too with
right.
the super suits and um, you know, I think there's always going to be like a certain level of, evolution and enhancement to the equipment and the shoes and things like that. That's going to impact, right? And like you wonder what you're even watching, right? Like, and then I mean, there's like you said, like if there's synthetics that they're not testing for, and um,
And the incentive is to take them because you get a bigger check, you get a bigger, whatever it is, more
yeah,
prestige, more social media followers. That's kind of a payment some system now. It's not totally absent of incentive to, yeah, again. And then I think of that Strauss article where he said these guys, they're willing to do anything, to be the
yeah,
best in the world. And if you're going to take those, that will help you be I'm thinking the Icarus documentary, right? The
yeah,
the one about that where the
yeah,
guy literally did it. He went, he was an amateur cyclist. Listeners, go watch that if you haven't seen it. He was an amateur cyclist, so he would compete in amateur things, but I think he would finish, 20th, 30th at place or something in some of these amateur things. As soon as he started blood doping for a year, I think he went to top five. He was in the top five automatically without doing changing any training that he was already training rigorously as an amateur, enthusiast, but still just incredible results that you get off of that like immediately. And he documents it, and it's actually really incredible to watch. And then that documentary, of course, turns into uncovering the Russian Olympic doping scandal, which is great. But
yeah. I mean, and then the other factor there is like when you talk about the money and the opportunities, right? Like there's a real serious doping problem in Kenya right now, right?
right,
And there's a reason for that. I mean, there's a glut of marathon runners and distance runners and that are looking to, I mean, running is their way to like to make it and
right,
get money and bring it back and buy land and cows and all the things that they need to subsist. um I mean, they're doping to like, crack that code and like,
right,
become one of those ones that, an agent signs or, even now, I mean, the colleges have recruiting services like bringing, uh, Kenyan and, other African runners to the US to run for college teams and run for cross country teams,
right.
and there's only a limited number of spots, right? And they're like they said, they're doing whatever they have to do, right,
Right.
to make it. And I mean, the stuff that like they're getting popped for isn't they're not like modern synthetics. I mean, they're like old school like stuff that like the West Germans and the East Germans and the Russians were getting popped for, 50 years ago, right?
Right.
Um, so
And
it's
probably contaminated and yeah.
yeah, I mean there's doping in sport. I don't necessarily think glorifying it, with enhanced games is a good thing. Like I said, I'm not a proponent of it.
Right.
But the curiosity in me is going to watch it.
Yeah, I feel the same way in terms of I'm curious enough to be like, let's see what these guys can do. And it'd be interesting to see how much does it really,
Well, yeah, I mean, like
yeah,
I mean, I've watched Fred Curley run for a long time,
right,
right? Like I know what he's capable of, right? Supposedly clean, right?
right,
I want to see like you said, like well, if he's gonna like dope to the gills, right? Like what is a guy that talented, right? Like capable of, right?
right,
I want to see, if there really is a substantial difference, right? And the thing I hate about it is, Fred has had got a tremendous career, tremendous accomplishments, and anything he does now, like with enhanced games, is like going to tarnish his entire career, right?
right,
If he goes and like runs, doesn't say he doesn't break, Bolt's world record in the 100, right? But like runs a time that's only slightly faster than his personal bests, right? It calls into question like every single performance that he's had
right,
and whether they were clean or not.
right,
And I hate that. And
right.
I mean, I hate that for him. I hate that for the sport. And that's why I'm not a proponent.
Right. Yeah. The Barry Bonds effect, right? The kind of diminishing the legacy of 20 years of great athleticism that we knew him for and loved him for. Yeah. And then there's I like this sense that there's an American sense, at least, of I think fairness. And I think it's something that Americans we tend to value a lot in terms of fair play, right? Like that's something that's very important to us. And when we find out that you weren't doing that or you were cheating the system in a certain way, I know we do look down on it culturally, individually. We just kind of there's a sense of we like fairness, we like a level playing field, at least as much as that's possible.
We do, but we also have internationally a holier thou attitude, like
Right.
about it, relative to, the international, doping scandals, right? Like that stuff can't and doesn't happen here. Like,
Right.
yes, like it's happening here, like for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I mean it's going to keep going on, listeners. Yeah, I mean obviously this is we're going to see. We're going to see if that happens, if it lasts, if it has an audience. We'll see if that happens. But switching gears to the novel now, although not totally switching gears because the Olympics matter, right? Sports journalism matters in the novel. I wanted to ask about the novel. I wanted to ask, what inspired you to make this transition into fiction writing? I always say, I joke that fiction writing is a terrible business model. Sports books, nonfiction writing, the deals are much better, the advances are much bigger usually, and you probably sell a little bit more. What made you want to take the shift into fiction writing? The successful journalism career, sports writing top of your game in this industry, covering Olympic athletes, international athletes. Um, what made you want to take the leap into fiction?
Yeah, well, it started in 2024. I was working for a company in Austin called Flow Sports. Great company. They do a lot of live streaming of what you would consider niche sports. Track and field being one of them. I ran their high school track and field division for about 7 years. I was there for almost 10. And I got laid off from my job. And I within the first week, I was like sitting here in this office. I'm like, what do I do? Like I have
Right.
time on my hands, right? Like, what am I going, And I've got a couple pictures of my daughter here on my desk, and one of the things that I always wished that she had, when she was learning her alphabet, was a track and field alphabet book, right? Like you can go on Amazon and find the ABCs of football, golf, gymnastics, like every sport, but there really wasn't one for track. And I'm like, well, what if I did that? Right. And so that started as my boredom project. And I sat down and, wrote out the alphabet and then started like trying to link, some of the best athletes in the history of sport, to those letters. And then, okay, do I have a good balance of Americans and international athletes and all the events, groups covered, right? And then, okay, well, now how do I sum up their careers in two sentences that rhyme? And so, sat there and did that. And it actually came fairly quickly. And I self-published that book. And again, it was a learning experience. My first time doing that. And it had a little bit of success. It won a children best children's learning book at the International Impact Book Awards, and I think going through that process kind of opened the door then to like start writing Beneath the Rings. My parents have begged me my entire life, like knowing like how like, this creative writing has like been in me for a long time. You need to write a book. You need to write a book. You need to write a book. When do you have the time to write a book? Like when you're working full time, all these years, right? Like, and not only that, but like, some of it's a lot of travel too, right? There was a point in time where I was like all over the world covering track meets and marathons and things like that. So like when are you going to have the time to do that? And like, well, suddenly now I've got the time, right,
Right.
to do that. And um, I decided that well, like here's your chance, to put that creative writing to use and write that novel. And I didn't want to go nonfiction. I think I've got some ideas of things that I would like to do in a nonfiction world, and they're like mostly centered on autobiographies and things like that. And would work with some athletes that may be interested in doing that. But I wanted to write a fiction book that was kind of based in the Olympic world, that I've been a part of, for a long time. And yeah, future said it. I didn't want it to be some historical fiction piece, right?
Right.
Let's make it, a little bit more in the future. And yeah, it just started to come together a little bit at a time. I was kind of a little bit unorthodox. I don't know that I actually like outlined like how I wanted to, you know, build the story. I just started writing a little bit at a time, and where does it go? Okay, you've got this chapter down. Like, well, where does it go from here? And
Right.
just kind of took that approach. I don't. I think
It's the
if I
Stephen
did
King
it, if I did
approach.
it again, I think I would probably like try a rough outline first. But again, was all new to me.
Right.
Like the writing and the types of writing that I've done my entire career um, is not sitting down and writing a fiction novel, right? So um, I don't know that I really knew how to approach it. I just approached it the best way that I knew how, and that was kind of like how I would approach writing a long form feature or a magazine style feature, right? Only it's not a magazine feature, it's a novel.
Yeah. So that's the Stephen King approach. That's what he says he does. Is he said it's all about what happens next. You
Yeah.
write the chapter, it's like, and then it's about, okay, now what? Where never outlines anything. It's about what
Yeah.
happens next. And sometimes that can lead you down some crazy paths. That could be a lot of interesting, a lot of fun, a lot of, make for great stories. Yeah, you don't. So we love hearing that too. With the, I was curious about this, and then kind of the kidnapping aspect. The disappearing aspect. I was asking like, was this kind of already being written before the kind of latest iteration of the Israel-Palestine conflict, or the kind of famous hostage situation from those Olympics? Um, what am I thinking of? Is before I was born, but I remember, reading about all that.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on Munich, for sure, and just like kind of a little bit harrow back to that. Another thing that I knew I wanted, the Israelis and the Lebanese involved. Obviously they're adversaries. I knew for starters that like I wanted the Israelis involved again, not only just hearkening back to um, Munich, what happened there in '72, but also from an experience that I had the first time I went to Doha. I went to the World Indoor Championships for track and field, and they had an opening ceremony, in the arena. And when the Israelis came in, like they were just booed loudly. So like that's happening in this Arab nation. So um, with the story being set in Doha, right? Like that was kind of also top of mind, and
Right.
and why I chose the Israeli and Lebanese.
Yeah. Have you, I know the book's only been out a few months. Have you had any pushback on that? I know people are very sensitive about the Israel topic right now. No.
No,
Good. Good. Yeah.
no.
Good.
I think the book has been pretty well reviewed so far on Amazon, and nobody has brought that up.
Good. Good.
So
Good.
and anybody that I have sent it to has not brought that up either. So I don't know.
Good, good. I like hearing that. I like hearing that because I like to know whether it also depends how you publish it too. I imagine, going through certain presses, certain of the big five presses and things like that, it might be held up a little bit if you're, having this kind of, obviously it's not like you planned on it, but a modern day conflict that is kind of maybe a little too reflected in the fiction or something. Then everybody gets a little nervous all of a sudden. So it's always it's good that that's not happening because
Yeah.
I've heard stories of entire novels, getting pulled by, great writers that should have their novels out just because of a little thing like that. Everybody's afraid of a hypothetical reaction to it. Like hasn't even
Yeah.
happened yet, but they're just afraid of this hypothetical and that could, might, maybe, possibly. So good that you're not having any of that. You said no outline. What is your writing routine like? We like to ask this stuff. How do you like to get your writing done? And this could be for, the nonfiction or the fiction we like to ask, is there a difference between those when you approach them and all of that?
Um, if I'm writing something longer, I tend to like quiet. If it's I've been around noisy newsrooms for so long, right? Like I don't have a problem like writing, 1,000, 2,000 word something, right? Like in that noisy environment, like that doesn't bother me. But anytime I've, sat down to like write a magazine feature, I've kind of done it in quiet, for sure. And my routine for writing this book was, I had heard, people advise like, okay, like you need to get like 3,000 words written a day. I'm like, I don't buy that. I want it. My approach was like, can you get something good down today?
Right.
Whether it was, three paragraphs or, a whole chapter or like, whatever it was, right? Like, can I get something good written today? And I definitely went quality over quantity. There were days where, um, I would write, a couple paragraphs and then think about like, oh, okay, like where I need to take this, right? I need to do some research, right? And then again, because I didn't use that outline approach, right? Like I would stop writing and then like go, be researching like, as I was setting up, the terrorist organization and trying to come up with their backstory, right? Like I needed that, sort of rooted in some kind of, real life tension, right? Like so, when I got to that point, I was like, okay, I need to go read up on, some of, the happenings, in the Middle East and some of, uh, those important, flame up touch points, right? Like that, can be the jump off point for like, where some of these bad guys, right, became disenfranchised. And so, I mean, that was important
Right.
as well. So, I mean, there were some days where I could get through an entire chapter. I remember like the first draft of my opening chapter, I was able to write, um, I think fairly quickly in that, it was kind of focused on, setting the Olympic stage, right? And the opening ceremonies, things that I have experienced firsthand, four times, right? That was a little bit easier to put together, but then there were, other times where, I only got a few paragraphs or something written.
Yeah. And that's how it always goes, right? I mean, it's all we just like to know, yeah, how you like to work it out because everybody has their own little techniques. I've even seen screenwriters that have said, oh, how many pages a day? And he's like, pages a day. He's like, sometimes 8. He's like, sometimes 20. He's like, sometimes 0. And they're like, oh, why is there? He's like, well, because he's like, I want good pages. He's like, I'm not going to sit there and force myself to write 4 or 5. If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Board. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Board is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard. 5 pages if I'm hating every minute of it or I'm thinking every word is wrong, I'm just, okay, well, today's a bad day. Yeah, just how it goes. And then, yeah, the outlines. And obviously there's the famous, everybody listening knows this, right? The architects and gardeners, right? The kind of outlining versus watering an idea and letting it grow and blossom on its own and kind of rolling with it. Yeah, both work. Both are valid ways to craft a creative story. But yeah, I mean, some people like those outlines just because it does give you that kind of scaffolding, to where you're headed, and maybe because it maybe even would take less time if you sat and planned out the outline. So I understand why people do that, but it's a lot more fun to just kind of roll with it. Like you said, find an idea. You're like, oh, I guess I wrote this into the story. I guess I better research this, and then you start
Yeah.
researching, and then you're like, okay, this is how it's going to work out. And then everything starts coming together. Do you like to handwrite, type, all this? What do you like to do do you like to take little notes? I mean, how do you like to plan it?
I did this all on computer. I didn't handwrite anything. One thing that I did do, as I was writing and introducing characters, I kept a separate document of just a list of my characters and like,
Right,
you know, who they were, like where they came in, like, where they from, like just make sure that like when those characters continued to pop up, at later parts of the book, there was consistency, and making sure that like all the athletes that I brought in, their names, their nationalities, what events were they at, like, kept that separate character document.
right.
But I didn't really handwrite anything. I would scribble some notes every once in a while in my notebook.
Right.
Um,
An
but
idea or yeah, something comes to you.
yeah, but like the everything was typewritten.
Yeah. And
I,
that's the
I
thing.
I
That's
was
the
talking to somebody that recently that like hand wrote their entire
yeah.
manuscript, and I'm like, well, why did you do that? And they were like, I don't know, that was just more comfortable for me.
Yeah. I like to ask because we've had writers on the, yeah, do the handwritten, will write an entire novel handwritten, whew, not just an outline or anything. I'm like, why? God? I mean, just,
My arthritic hands would be like would fall off if I had to do that.
and then there's some, yeah, that are just like, I don't even have a notebook. I just do everything digital. Both work. Yeah. I would say typing is definitely faster too. I mean, at least because it depends how quickly you can write and, legibly and stuff you can write. I have sloppy handwriting. So if I was handwriting a whole novel, I would be, when I went to type it up, I would be like, what did I write? I'd
Exactly.
be like
I'm
trying to
kind of
look.
the same way. Like if I hand wrote an entire book, it would like you would have thought a serial killer like put it together. Like
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. And I mean, I like post-its. So occasionally I'll do a post-it, slap it there. There's an idea. Yeah. Or like,
yeah.
yeah,
I
something.
just I just literally have an open little notepad here and like and a pen sitting on it, and I will scribble
Yeah.
an idea or something like that in there.
Yeah, and it's just that's the magic. That's the magic of crafting this stuff. And it's people always love to ask, where does it come from? Well, it's a pretty tough one to answer because it came from this little piece over here and this little piece over here, and then my 20 years experience over here, and then this little idea that just came to me while I was taking a shower. I mean, it's just all these different things. Where does it come from? Who knows? Okay, but it came together in this way, so that's great. Uh, Another one we like to ask, I guess we already kind of know the answer to this. We like to ask, how do you make a living? And again, we don't need any numbers or anything like that, but it's tough out there for writers. So a lot of our writers like to know, how do you make a living? Do you make any money off the books? Um, Obviously, your day job is covering the Olympic athletes and things like that, being a sports journalist. I mean,
Well, my day job right now is like I really don't have a paying full-time job. I'm doing some work for a group that's looking to bring professional track and field, create a developmental track and field league, and I've been helping with that for a little over a year, and so my wife has like suddenly become the breadwinner for us. And she's got her own interior design business, and it's been a rough couple of years. Like I mean, between needing she's starting a business, so like the money actually isn't like flowing in
right,
super high, but like she's built it to a point now where she not every penny is going to be reinvested. Like we can start, taking a salary there. Uh, Had a lot of tap into savings to like, pay the bills.
right,
I don't know what the sales report is on Beneath the Rings yet. Like I think, you kind of get quarterly reports,
right,
and we haven't gotten through the quarter yet. So, I guess the jury is out on, how many books are being sold out there. But I mean, my goal is for the book to be commercially successive. Like
right.
I mean, I would love for that to happen. But as of right now, no, I don't know. I could not tell you, how much money I've made on the book yet.
Yeah. And I mean, we just asked this just because it's rough out there, for writers at every level in almost every industry. If you're trying to be a writer, no matter what level, if you're trying to do straight journalism, if you're trying to do fiction writing, you're trying to do sports stuff, you're trying to do TV, I mean, any type of writing, even copywriting and stuff like that now they're drying up. I mean, at least in terms of like livable wages that you're going to get from it and full-time positions, salaries and benefits. They're just going. They're just gone. They're disappearing here. So yeah, we like to ask because it's rough out there and everybody's
It is.
curious. Yeah, everybody wants to have that, but it's rough to do, and the industry is cutthroat. It's rough to. I mean, even the big presses, I mean, they have no idea how to market books any longer. I mean, in the social media age, they still really haven't adapted to the social media, how to market. And I mean, it's just something that we constantly talk about on the podcast. Being a books and writing podcast, it's just, yeah, it's interesting what's happening and how and what can be done about it too. Everyone talks about book sales are down, people aren't reading as much, and all of that is true. But then sometimes there will be a book that breaks through and everybody's talking about it, and I get those are exceptions to the rule, not the rule, but it's just yeah, I mean, for people like us and people listening, I mean, it is a sad, like that's why I said elegy earlier for the industry, but we are losing something, and it's hard to talk about. It's an intangible thing, even, what we got out of these stories and novels that we would share and through generations and civilizations, even, these stories that would endure just less emphasis, or at least less, just not a way to make money off of it. And then people would argue, there was never really a way to make money off of it unless you were a Stephen King. And people would also know, I think it's probably true too that his career was mostly due to a few of the movies that were big hits early on in his career, Carrie and then The Shining. I mean, what The Shining was like his third or fourth book or something. And by that point, it was off to the races. So yeah, I mean, it's just interesting how that's playing out and nobody knows. And so we like to ask about it.
Yeah, yeah. I think I would expect that like this book is fingers crossed going to be successful. I don't know that it's going to make enough money to, pay all our bills.
Right,
My hope is that um, it can be adapted to screenplay, and
right.
like if that can happen, then like maybe there's some financial windfall that could come out of that. But like you said, it's hard, right? Like
Yeah,
how many books are breaking through from unknown authors,
right.
right?
Even the major presses are not putting any kind of marketing behind first time authors, at least, like they kind of, which is always that, my generation always talks about this, where like, oh, they want a job, it's an entry level position, but they want 5, 10 years experience for the entry level position. And it's like, well, you're not, how are you going to get that for an entry level position? Same type
Mhm.
of thing, right? They want a new writers, they want to support new writers, but they also want a built-in audience. They also want somebody who already has done the work of marketing themselves to an audience, and they're like, oh, we're not interested unless you can, help us do these sales. And it's like, well, it's kind of a catch-22 for people trying to break in. And that's why I asked earlier about, just kind of opportunities to break into industries. And then any type of writing industry right now is really, really rough.
Yeah.
Partly because local papers are going away. So you only have national papers, which are even more cutthroat, harder to get a job in, the kind of, yeah, the filtering and grooming mechanisms that used to work for hundreds of years are kind of going by the wayside. It's just crazy out there how this is working out. But how's the launch gone for this so far in terms of the book launch? Because that's always things that, you're doing media appearances, obviously, and things like podcasts like this. I mean, how has that gone so far in terms of launching a book? Because I think people don't have they misunderstand what that is too. Like,
Yeah, it's been interesting. I've we've made a social push. Franklin Publishers has been really great to work with, and they created a whole bunch of social media content in the lead up, and we were able to build some posts and campaigns right after the launch in October, and built it right through here. I've been working, fortunately, with PR by the Book, who's been like really great in setting up speaking engagements, like in podcasts and interviews, and that's something that I think I really needed help with, right? Like as
right,
a first time novelist, and still like trying to figure this industry out. Having some really good professional PR help has been good, and I know they're working on a whole bunch of other things, but so far it's been mostly podcast interviews, and I did a TV interview for a morning show in San Antonio, and I know I've got several more podcasts, booked up already. So it's been a lot of, word of mouth through podcasts so far.
Yeah. Yeah, we had another author on a few months ago who said something I'll never forget, where he just said, you can write books or you can market books. You can't do both at the same time. Where he's like, yeah, it's very hard, maybe even harder to market a book than it is
I
to
think it
write one.
is.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
really, I mean, it's like, okay, you've spent, a year plus or whatever, putting this book together. Okay, you got it published. Now what?
right, yeah,
It's on Amazon. Great. Like, okay, it's,
yeah, with millions of other books.
right. Like, okay, you drop this thing into the ether right now. How do you get eyeballs on it?
Right. Yeah. And then, I mean, then that's not such an easy question to answer in the social media age. In the old days, you'd be, oh, go on 60 Minutes. Oh, go on the morning shows. Oh, have it reviewed in the book, the Times book review. Those were ways to get sales or get people to notice it and stuff. They just aren't anymore. I had a friend that did this, and she went through a big five press first novel. So, of course, and then she had said that they gave her very little marketing. They did get the New York Times book review and stuff, obviously, and you wouldn't have gotten that without the press pushing for that. So that's a benefit to a big press like that, pushing your book out. But other than that, it really didn't move the needle in terms of sales or anything anymore because it just doesn't like it used to. And we're all still kind of scrambling. So, I mean, yeah, we're just kind of fascinated how this is working out. So we like to ask authors when they come on what they're seeing, what the experience has been, just because it is so all over the place now. And everybody's kind of, yeah, not necessarily, it's more nuanced than just throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks, obviously. But sometimes it feels like that, like where
Right.
we're, yeah, how it's working.
I think the thing that's been encouraging, and I did not know this again, like, being a first time novelist, is like really how many, writing and author, dedicated podcasts that there are.
Right.
And being able to get on a whole bunch of them and talk about the book and the writing process and all of these things like we're talking about today is really awesome. And I think um, the more of these, the better.
Right. Yeah.
For all the authors out there.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's what we try to do here too. We like to try to hopefully give a second wind to books and writing and poetry. We like poetry on this podcast too. The last couple questions here we'd like to ask about you. We'd like to ask, are you reading anything good, watching anything good, listening to anything good? What's filling your head right now
Well,
in
like I
terms of
said,
media?
I'm deep into the Stephen King audiobook, and I've got another one ready to go right after that. So that's kind of where my reading head has sort of been. In terms of watching things. What have we watched good lately?
It could be anything, it'd be reality TV, whatever's filling.
Yeah, we we watch a lot of news and at night, just like mindless kind of stuff. Uh, we've got a 7-year-old daughter that like, so we've pretty much got K-pop Demon Hunters on like on repeat.
That counts, that fills the
That
head,
that,
yeah.
that counts, I guess. Um, I think of uh, uh, we watched the Netflix documentary on Eddie Murphy, which was fascinating.
I haven't
Uh,
seen it.
it was, I mean, it was really good, and like really stretched his life and career, and talk about evolution, right?
Right,
And how things even changed for him from becoming a stand-up to movie star to then he's you know got kids and then like transitioning into doing things like Donkey from Shrek and
right.
things like that. So that was a pretty fascinating watch. My wife being like I said, an interior designer, she was Owning Manhattan on Netflix. She's a big Ryan Serhant fan, so we should binge watch that earlier in the week. But yeah,
Uh,
I kind of go back and like I rewatch things,
yeah,
a gazillion times. I am like the biggest, probably Sopranos fan, like come
yeah.
to New Jersey ever. I mean, they filmed episodes of The Sopranos at my grandmother's house, so um, I can sit down and just like watch that over and 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 over again and like not be bored. So um,
And you see
yeah,
the
I'm kind of like
landmarks and yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's I said all that stuff counts. And the reason I asked is just, as a creative, as what's filling your head is what comes out, and in small ways and sometimes large ways, you don't even maybe not intend to. So I'm always just curious, little things that fill. Did you watch the Jordan documentary by chance? The
I
the
did,
Last
yeah.
Dance. What
Yep.
did you think of the?
I love that.
Yeah,
I
fantastic.
mean, I'm obviously, I mean, Jordan was a god for us growing up, right?
Yeah.
So, kind of peeling the onion back, and seeing that was really good. There's the Untold series on Netflix are really good, sports, kind of themed, short documentaries. I kind of like watching those. Trainwreck on Netflix is pretty good. Poop Cruise and some of the
Right, right. Yeah.
some of
Yeah.
those are pretty good.
The stranger than fiction aspect of a lot of those is
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So yeah, I mean I mean, when we sit down to like watch TV at night, I mean, like we're pretty wiped,
yeah. Right.
get Gigi to bed at sometime hopefully before 8 o'clock, and at that point it's like, all right, like what are we going to watch for the next 2-3 hours before we go to bed ourselves, and like I say that I've like kind of turned into my dad where, I'll put the TV on and just like fall asleep on the couch,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
5 minutes into watching whatever we're watching. So
Yeah.
it's been pretty bad
So
showing my
I
age.
have a 1 year old, so I'm definitely living that right now. Yeah, I took me I think 3 tries to watch the latest Mission Impossible on streaming.
Right.
I kept falling asleep 30 minutes in. I would argue it's because the movie wasn't that good, but it's
Right.
probably because I was
There's
exhausted.
there's fatigue in there involved there too.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's fantastic. And the last question we like to ask is, what are you working on now? What's filling up your time, your creative energy?
I've been kind of focused on just the promotion of the book right now, and I mean, you sort of have to switch gears, right?
Yeah,
That you write a novel and promote a novel, right? So I have been doing that a lot. I've actually started jotting down ideas for a sequel to this book. I kind of left it open that
right,
like we could do another one. I've got some ideas of and where that could go. It's not an outline by any stretch. It's just like a scribble down of, some ideas,
right,
a couple new characters to introduce. Which characters can I bring back, and in what capacity?
right. The
So
2044 games or
right,
yeah.
and so I've kind of been working on that. I mean, but right now, like the promotion has
Oh yeah.
kind of been where I've been zoned in.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I think people underestimate how much that takes out of you to promote the book as well.
Right.
There's always been stories, Hemingway and these people that hated doing media stuff. They hated doing the push and all of that. Even writers that, around today. I mean, Stephen King, he doesn't do that much media. I mean, he doesn't have to anymore, but
Right.
he doesn't really do much because, of course, if you have the choice, why would you want to do all that? If you don't have to. Yeah, it's just insane how
Yeah,
that
and
plays
I
out.
mean, you always hear stories too about like, actors and actresses that like
Right,
do these movies and then they don't want to do the press junket. Well, like, I mean, you're if and I guess it sort of depends on how they're being paid, but if they've got like points in the, they've got skin in the game, like
right,
why wouldn't you like want to go out and promote it because it's only going to line your pockets, right? Like For me, right, and being a again first time novelist, it's like I want to do whatever I can to make this book a success, right, and give it every shot to be a success, right.
Right.
I don't know if it's going to be a commercial success. God, I want it to be, but I'm going to do whatever I can, to
Right.
do that. And I don't necessarily want to be bogged down like on another creative project, while I'm doing this. And
Yeah.
um, I mean, and then there's a part of me that's like, well, if this book isn't successful, do I want to write another one, right? Like, do I
Right.
want to go through with all that again, right? Like, I don't know.
Well, and then you mentioned some biography stuff that the older I get too, the more I realized uh, how important biographers were,
Mhm.
and how they kind of set the tone for the historical interpretation of some of these figures. Obviously, you point to the big ones, the guy that does, what's his name, Isaac. Yeah, no, he did the Elon Musk. He did the Einstein, whatever. He did a bunch of these great biographies, and I'm thinking of the great literary biographies and things that kind of give you a glimpse. I always say, so that's so important, and it's telling that that's unfortunately a section of literature that is the sales are going down, and that just like everything else, because it's just so important. So, as I said, I'm looking forward to some of those biography ideas you have. If you pursue those, are always needed too. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember as a kid reading, was it the Rudolph the Olympic sprinter or hurdler Rudolph?
Wilma
What was it?
Rudolph.
Yes, yes, with the leg braces as a guy. Again, I'm vaguely remembering this as like a children's story, like as I was getting read it, and then she went on to overcome that, a great American icon stuff. And like, yeah, like even as a kid, you don't even hear about that stuff, especially if it happened before you were born, unless there's a biography, a definitive kind of biography that historians are citing, to give a full picture of what happened and who these people were and all of that. So I'm really into that kind of stuff. I had an author on who wrote a fictionalized version of this, but he was writing about Red Grange, this kind of football star from back in the day. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, yeah, there's obviously some sports books written about that and stuff, but yeah, a fiction novel, these things set the tone. I was just watching Amadeus from 1984, the Mozart movie, and I was just thinking how that kind of sets the tone historically, even if it's not accurate, right? Everybody just kind of takes that as the tone setter. So I'm always like, yeah, these works of biography, these works of fictionalized biography even are so important culturally and historically that I'm just like, I should get more into reading some of these, and maybe I should do an episode on one. I like to do book episodes when I'm curious. So maybe
There you
we'll
go.
have you back, Joe. We'll do
All right.
a big biography of sports guy or something like that.
I'm game.
Yeah. Joe, this has been fantastic. That was all I had. Where can people find you? Website, social media handles. Where can people find your stuff?
Yeah, my website is booksbybattaglia.com. All my socials are there. There's some bonus content on the website. I've done a bunch of blogs on characters in the book. So if you're reading the book and want to learn a little bit more backstory or want to do it vice versa and get some backstory on some of the characters and dive in, all that content is there. But yeah, all my social handles, like everything is on booksbybattaglia.com.
And that is linked below. And that is linked below as well, listeners. Go click on it. Go check out Joe's stuff. Joe Battaglia, thank you so much for coming on Heavy Board. This has been fantastic.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I love what you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, we had said we have to come. You have to come back. I have a rule, stupid rule in this podcast, where I was like, the first time an author comes on, we do like an interview about your life, your childhood, the writing, and blah blah. And I was like, all right, the next time instead of doing a second interview, let's do like a book together or something. We talk about a book or something. I'm always like, ah. So when I have a guest come on, I try to think. I was like, what are they like? What are those like? All right, let's do some sports stuff because I have not covered it. So please come back with that next book. Come back with whatever you're working on, Joe. Please, we'd love to have you.
Okay, I will.
Heavy.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy bored.
I may say that the male is entirely hostile. No! Inner
Resources.
life, friends, is boring. We must not say so. Are you radioactive now?
Inner.
Resources, American resources.
Being bored,
Some activities are intentional, right?
it shows such a lack
Heavy.
of gratitude for life. Bored. I aspire to boredom, I
Heavy.
should say.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy
Bored.
Has you the night sweats and the day sweats, pal? Pal, I do.
If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Bored. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavybored. That's right, Heavy Bored is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard.